The day my HOA neighbor called the police over my garden gnomes because she claimed they were emotionally disturbing to the neighborhood, I honestly thought the situation could not get more ridiculous. Then 2 weeks later, a full-sized Tyrannosaurus Rex statue appeared in my front yard and turned our quiet suburban street into the strangest tourist attraction in the county. My name is Kevin Lawson, and until all this happened, my biggest hobby in life was collecting weird garden decorations. Nothing offensive, nothing dangerous, just funny little statues and old flea market pieces that made people laugh when they walked past my house. And honestly, most neighbors loved it. Kids smiled when they saw tiny gnomes fishing beside fake ponds delivery. Drivers took photos beside the pirate gnome near my mailbox. Even older couples walking dogs would stop sometimes just to look around my yard because it felt different from every other perfectly trimmed HOA lawn, but one person absolutely hated it. Her name was Sharon Miller, but everybody secretly called her Karen because she acted like the neighborhood was her personal kingdom. Before this story gets completely insane, make sure to like and subscribe to Karen Stories Daily, because what started with harmless garden gnomes somehow ended with a giant dinosaur changing our entire neighborhood forever. Now I need to explain something important. None of my decorations violated HOA rules. I checked carefully before ever placing anything outside. There were size limits and safety restrictions, but nothing banning garden statues or decorations. So technically, I was fully within the rules, but Sharon did not care about technicalities. She cared about control. The first complaint happened 3 months. After she moved into the neighborhood, I came home from work and found a printed HOA warning taped to my front door, claiming my decorations created visual discomfort for nearby residents. Visual discomfort, I actually laughed reading it because I thought somebody was joking. But then Sharon marched across the street that same evening and told me my gnomes were creepy and lowering the class of the neighborhood. According to her, the blank little eyes made children uncomfortable. Meanwhile, kids literally stopped outside daily, asking to take pictures beside them. I tried being polite at first. I explained the decorations, followed HOA rules completely, and several neighbors enjoyed them. But Sharon was one of those people who treated disagreement like a personal attack. Every conversation became an argument. Every argument became another complaint. Over the next few weeks, she filed report after report against my yard. One day, the gnomes were apparently too close to the sidewalk. The next week, she claimed they created a hostile atmosphere because some wore tiny pirate hats and fake sunglasses. I wish I was making that up. At one HOA meeting, she actually held up printed photos of my garden like she was presenting criminal evidence in court. The board members looked exhausted listening to her. One older board member finally checked the rule book directly during the meeting and confirmed again that my decorations violated absolutely nothing. Most people would have dropped it after that. Not Sharon. If anything, she became more obsessed. She started slowing down her car every morning just to stare at my yard while shaking her head dramatically. Then she began posting online neighborhood complaints claiming my house looked like a haunted miniature carnival. That phrase actually became popular in the community because people thought it sounded hilarious. One teenager even made it his social media bio for a week. But the situation turned genuinely strange when Sharon called local police over the gnomes, and yes, I am serious. One afternoon while I was watering plants, 2 officers knocked on my door asking about reports of disturbing lawn displays, frightening residents. I honestly thought it was a prank at first. The officers walked through the yard, looked around silently. Then one of them actually started laughing after seeing a tiny gnome holding a fishing rod beside my bird bath. Even they could not believe someone called police over lawn ornaments after hearing the situation. They apologized for wasting time and left without issue. But standing there watching police inspect harmless garden gnomes changed something in my brain because suddenly I realized Sharon would never stop unless somebody gave her a reality check. So ridiculous, she could not possibly escalate further. And that is when the idea entered my head. A dinosaur. Not a small one. Full-sized realistic Tyrannosaurus Rex statue. At first, it was just a joke between me and my cousin while we were eating dinner. Then, the more we talked about it, the funnier it became. because technically the HOA rules only restricted dangerous structures and permanent buildings. There was nothing specifically banning oversized decorative statues, especially temporary display pieces. Naturally, I started researching immediately. And to my complete shock, I actually found one for sale through a local event company that rented giant dinosaur props for museums, fairs, and movie promotions. The thing stood nearly 15 feet tall with realistic paint, giant teeth, glowing eyes, and an open, roaring mouth. The moment I saw the photos, I knew this was happening. I rented it for 1 month legally, properly permitted, and completely within HOA guidelines. The company delivered it early Saturday morning, while half the neighborhood was still asleep. I will never forget watching that massive dinosaur slowly rise above the houses on a crane, while neighbors walked outside holding coffee cups, completely frozen in confusion. Kids started cheering. Immediately, people pulled out phones, cars slowed down in the street, and right in the middle of all that chaos, Sharon stepped outside her front door wearing a robe and nearly dropped her coffee mug onto the driveway. Her face looked like somebody had personally declared war against her soul. The T-Rex towered over my front lawn, perfectly positioned beside the exact spot where my little garden gnomes used to sit, and honestly, it looked incredible. The detailing was insanely realistic. Huge claws, sharp, painted scales, massive yellow eyes staring down the street. At night, the company even installed subtle lighting underneath that made the dinosaur glow dramatically. After sunset, by evening, our neighborhood had transformed into a full tourist stop. Families from nearby streets started driving past, slowly just to look at it. Teenagers took selfies beside it, kids begged parents to stop for photos, even delivery drivers were laughing during drop-offs. Meanwhile, Sharon completely lost her mind. She stormed directly to the HOA president, demanding immediate removal of what she called prehistoric harassment. That phrase spread through the neighborhood almost instantly, and people could not stop joking about it. But once again, the HOA checked every rule carefully and discovered something painful for Sharon. The dinosaur technically violated nothing. It was classified as temporary lawn decor connected to a permitted display rental, completely legal, completely compliant, and absolutely impossible for her to remove. Quickly, that was the moment the real neighborhood war officially began. The day after the dinosaur arrived, the entire neighborhood felt different. Usually our street stayed quiet and predictable, but now every few minutes another car slowly rolled past, just to look at the giant T-Rex standing in my yard like some escaped. Movie monster guarding suburban mailboxes, kids absolutely loved it. Parents kept stopping for pictures. Even people from nearby neighborhoods started showing up after someone posted photos online with the caption, HOA Karen accidentally creates Dinosaur Park. That post exploded faster than anyone expected. And honestly, the funniest part was watching Sharon completely unravel in real time. Every morning, she would open her curtains, stare directly at the dinosaur, and immediately close them. Again, like she was trying to escape a nightmare. But the T-Rex was impossible to ignore, especially at night. The rental company had installed soft ground lights underneath the statue, and after sunset, the giant dinosaur looked even more dramatic, towering over the neighborhood with glowing shadows stretching across the lawns. People loved it so much that neighbors started bringing lawn chairs outside during evenings just to sit around talking while kids played nearby. For the first time in years, the neighborhood actually felt fun, and that somehow made Sharon even angrier. 3 days later, she called another emergency HOA meeting completely dedicated to my yard. I went mostly because I wanted to hear how she planned to explain that a dinosaur was somehow threatening public safety. The meeting room was packed, not because people were upset, but because everyone secretly wanted entertainment, and Sharon delivered exactly that. She stood up holding printed photos of the dinosaur from different angles while talking about emotional distress, property value, destruction, and what she called predatory visual energy. I am not joking. Those were her actual words. At one point, she even claimed the glowing eyes created psychological intimidation for passing residents. Meanwhile, several people in the room were literally trying not to laugh. Then one older homeowner calmly raised his hand and said his grandkids had visited more often that week than they had in months because they loved seeing the dinosaur. Another neighbor admitted local businesses nearby were getting extra customers because people kept driving through the area. Suddenly, the entire meeting turned against Sharon without anyone planning it because people realized something important. The dinosaur was actually making the neighborhood happier. And after years of endless HOA complaints and boring rule enforcement, most residents secretly enjoyed seeing somebody finally outsmart the system. The board checked the rules again, one final time. No violations. No safety problems. No legal reason for removal. Sharon looked absolutely furious, hearing it confirmed publicly. But instead of giving up, she doubled down harder than ever. She started posting long, angry neighborhood messages, online warning people that the dinosaur represented declining community standards that only made things worse for her because residents began creating memes using photos of the T-Rex. Somebody edited sunglasses onto it. Another person added fake HOA, president captions under its face. Within days, the dinosaur basically became a local celebrity, and then something happened. Nobody expected. A local news station contacted me asking if they could film a short community story about the giant dinosaur, causing HOA drama. The second I heard that, I already knew Sharon was going to lose her mind completely. The news crew arrived Saturday morning, and within an hour, half the neighborhood was outside watching interviews happen directly beside the T-Rex kids. Waved at cameras, neighbors. Laughed. One reporter jokingly called it the most peaceful HOA rebellion ever recorded. And standing across the street, Sharon watched the entire thing happen with the angriest expression I have ever seen on another human being, because what started as her attempt to remove harmless garden gnomes had now turned into a giant public embarrassment she could no longer control. The entire community had chosen sides, and almost nobody was standing with her anymore. After the news segment aired, everything became even crazier. People from completely different towns started driving through our neighborhood just to see the dinosaur everybody was talking about online. At one point, traffic actually slowed near our street because cars kept stopping for pictures beside the T-Rex. I would walk outside in the mornings and see random families posing near my mailbox while kids pointed up at the dinosaur like they had arrived at some mini theme park. And honestly, I could not stop laughing because all of this started over a few harmless garden gnomes. Meanwhile, Sharon looked more stressed every single day. She stopped waving at neighbors completely and started avoiding community conversations because nobody took her complaints seriously anymore. Every time she tried talking about property values, somebody would joke that the dinosaur probably increased them through tourism. One neighbor even started calling my house Jurassic HOA online, and the name spread instantly through the community page. Then things got even funnier. Local businesses began joining the joke. A pizza shop nearby created a T-Rex special. A coffee place offered a drink called the Karen Meltdown. And somehow the giant dinosaur became the unofficial mascot of our neighborhood within less than 2 weeks. The HOA board absolutely hated the attention, but legally their hands were tied because the statue still violated zero rules. That was driving Sharon insane. She kept trying to find new ways to attack the situation. One afternoon, she actually measured the dinosaur's shadow with a tape measure, claiming it crossed too far onto community grass during sunset. I stood there watching her do this while 2 teenagers nearby recorded the entire thing, trying not to laugh. At that point, even I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then came the neighborhood barbecue that changed everything completely. Usually HOA events were awkward and quiet because people mostly attended out of obligation. But this time, residents decided to host the barbecue directly beside my house near the dinosaur families, brought food. Kids wore fake dinosaur hats. Somebody even placed tiny toy gnomes around the T-Rex feet like it was their prehistoric king. The atmosphere felt completely different from normal HOA events. People were relaxed, laughing, actually talking to each other instead of complaining. And for the first time since I moved there, the neighborhood felt united instead of divided, which made Sharon's reaction even more unbelievable. Because instead of ignoring the event, she marched straight into the middle of the barbecue and demanded the HOA shut it down immediately. She claimed the dinosaur created a hostile visual environment and encouraged disorderly behavior. Nobody even knew how to respond to that sentence. Then one little kid looked up at her and innocently asked why she hated fun so much. The silence after that hit harder than any argument ever could. Even several board members looked embarrassed, and Sharon, realizing the crowd was no longer supporting her, stormed away furious, while everyone just stood there awkwardly quiet for a few seconds. Then somebody started laughing. Then another person joined in, and suddenly the entire barbecue erupted into laughter so loud Sharon could probably hear it from inside her house. That was the exact moment her control over the neighborhood completely disappeared. Because once people stop taking fear seriously, it loses all power. And from that point forward, the giant T-Rex was no longer just a lawn decoration, it became a symbol that the HOA could not bully everyone forever. After the barbecue, something shifted permanently inside the neighborhood. People who normally stayed quiet during HOA meetings suddenly started speaking up about all kinds of ridiculous rules they had tolerated for years. One family complained about getting fined because their basketball hoop stayed outside overnight. Another neighbor talked about receiving warning letters over wind chimes. And once everyone started sharing stories, the entire community realized Sharon had been controlling people through intimidation more than actual rules. The dinosaur accidentally exposed all of it every evening. More residents gathered near my yard just talking, laughing and sharing HOA horror stories, while kids played around the giant T-Rex like it was a public park attraction. Honestly, it became the most social our neighborhood had ever been. Then Sharon made the biggest mistake of the entire situation. She secretly contacted the rental company, pretending to represent the HOA, and demanded immediate removal of the dinosaur. But the owner of the company luckily called me first because he thought the situation sounded suspicious. The second I heard what happened, I knew Sharon had crossed a serious line. I immediately reported the impersonation attempt directly to the HOA board, and this time even they looked shocked because now there was proof she had tried using HOA authority for personal revenge, and residents were already frustrated with her behavior before this happened. The next HOA meeting became absolute chaos. The room was packed again, but this time, nobody came for entertainment. People came angry. Several homeowners demanded Sharon step down immediately. Others accused the board of enabling her behavior for years. One older resident stood up and said the dinosaur was not the real problem. The real problem was living under constant fear of petty complaints and power trips. That sentence changed the entire room. For the first time, the conversation stopped being about my yard and became about the HOA itself, and honestly, Sharon looked completely unprepared for that shift. She tried defending herself, saying she only wanted to preserve community standards, but nobody was listening anymore, because residents had finally realized something important. The neighborhood became happier the moment people stopped taking every tiny rule seriously. Then came the final blow. The HOA treasurer revealed the board had spent thousands of dollars handling Sharon's nonstop complaints, legal consultations, and emergency meetings over harmless decorations. The entire room exploded with frustration. People could not believe community money had been wasted fighting garden gnomes and a dinosaur statue. One guy in the back literally stood up laughing and yelled, "We got Jurassic Park because Karen could not handle tiny hats." Even the board members struggled not to smile at that. By the end of the meeting, residents officially started a petition demanding leadership changes inside the HOA, and suddenly, Sharon was no longer the person controlling the neighborhood. She became the person everybody blamed for embarrassing it. The weirdest part, though, was what happened outside afterward. As residents walked out of the meeting, people naturally gathered. Near my house again, beside the dinosaur, kids played flashlight games around it, while neighbors talked for hours in lawn chairs, and standing there looking around, I realized something hilarious. The giant T-Rex had done more to bring the community together than the HOA ever had. Meanwhile, Sharon completely disappeared from neighborhood events after that night. Her curtains stayed closed most days, and people rarely saw her outside anymore. But the dinosaur stayed standing proudly in my yard, reminding everyone exactly how this whole ridiculous war started in the first place. About a week after that meeting, the HOA board officially announced new elections, and Sharon quietly resigned before the vote even happened. Nobody seemed surprised anymore, honestly. Most residents looked relieved because for the first time in years, the neighborhood finally felt peaceful instead of tense. And somehow, the giant dinosaur standing in my yard became part of that change. Families still stopped for photos every evening. Kids still waved at it from car windows. Even delivery drivers started calling my house the dinosaur place instead of using the address. The funniest part was watching how quickly people embraced the thing Sharon hated most. One neighbor painted tiny wooden signs pointing toward my yard saying T-Rex crossing. Another family left little toy dinosaurs near my mailbox as jokes. And somebody anonymously placed a miniature garden gnome wearing a crown at the dinosaur's feet one morning. I laughed so hard seeing that I nearly dropped my coffee. Eventually, the rental period ended, and the company came to remove the statue. The entire neighborhood actually gathered outside to watch it leave. Kids looked genuinely sad. Parents took final pictures. People who originally thought the idea was ridiculous admitted the dinosaur made the neighborhood more fun than it had been in years. As the crane slowly lifted the T-Rex above the houses, everybody clapped like we were saying goodbye to some local celebrity, and standing there watching it disappear into the truck, I realized something important. This whole situation was never really about garden gnomes. It was about one person trying to control everyone around them until the community finally pushed back together. The best part is my original gnomes eventually returned to the yard exactly where they used to be, only now nobody complained anymore. In fact, neighbors started adding funny decorations to their own lawns too. One house got giant flamingos, another family installed fake aliens near their flower bed. The street suddenly felt alive, creative, and welcoming instead of stiff and miserable. And honestly, Sharon accidentally caused all of it herself because if she had simply ignored a few harmless gnomes, none of this ever would have happened. No dinosaur, no neighborhood rebellion, no viral attention, no HOA meltdown, just quiet, boring lawns. So in the end, the giant T-Rex did something no HOA rule ever managed to accomplish. It brought the entire community together. If you enjoyed this crazy story from Karen Stories Daily, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video with someone who would absolutely put a dinosaur in their yard just to annoy an HOA Karen.